Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed, as created by Obsidian Entertainment. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you all for listening. Let's get into today's lore. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thanks everyone for joining me on another episode as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 as we gear up for the release of Avowed. For those wondering why we paired the games of Pillars of Eternity and Avowed together, it's because they share the same fantasy setting of the World of Eora. So if you are looking forward to Avowed or you're just into Pillars of Eternity, this is a show to go to if you're wanting to learn more about the lore of that world. To get ready for Avowed, appreciate the storytelling and the nuances of the writing, or if you just want to revisit some of your favorite lore from a game that you love, or perhaps you're new to all of this and you just want to understand the world that you're playing in. If you are new to the show, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here. I will signpost you towards episode 0, which will let you know some of the more foundational episodes to start on, but you're more than welcome to jump in here. Today is a spoiler-free episode, so I know that some of you out there are... I had 2 episodes back-to-back that were spoilery, but this one is not. There's no spoilers in this one. We're just going to be talking about a very interesting set of characters from the second Pillars of Eternity game today. And that character in question is Modwyr and Yngfrith. Modwyr is a talking sword in the second Pillars game. Yngfrith is a person that's related to that talking sword's story. If you've played through the game and you found Modwyr, then you almost certainly know their story. You know some of this lore. There's not a lot of hidden esoteric knowledge of this that I'm going to reveal in today's episode, but I love the story of Modwyr, where she came from and what happened to her, and where they end up with you, the player character, and kind of what that might all be an allegory for. So that's why I thought, good time to feature it on an episode, as well. It gives me an excuse to put some of that audio inside of the actual episode itself. No news to go over regarding Pillars of Eternity or Avowed. There is the occasional news article that comes out, but it's usually just along the lines of people giving their opinions on why Avowed might be doing something right or not doing something right, or a thing Avowed can do that would really make it the best game in the world, or things like that. So I think I recently saw one about the map decision to be not open world, but being open zones is something that can solve a problem within RPGs. I haven't read it all the way through, but usually a couple of these articles pop every now and then. But otherwise, no major news to go over. We can just dive straight into today's lore.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
So this is going to be a fun episode. I really loved finding Modwyr and going through her quest, if you will, and just discovering a little bit about her history and interacting with... Well, it's a talking sword. Who's not happy to have a talking sword in a fantasy game, right? That's always awesome. So to understand Modwyr a little bit more, let's kind of back up and take a outside-in perspective of, first of all, what is Modwyr? Modwyr is a soulbound sword found in Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. It's possessed by a somewhat filthy-minded spirit that can talk to you, the Watcher character. As you talk to this sword, you learn that it wants to find its owner again. It apparently thinks that it's supposed to come back for them, but it has been a long time since that's occurred. So soulbound weapons in the game of Pillars of Eternity are like what you might be familiar with from other fantasy games, where when a user wields a weapon of some sort, the weapon itself is now soulbound to that person in the sense that it will only gain levels, it will only get more powerful as long as it stays in the hands of that person. So if you were to take a soulbound weapon that your player character is using and then give it to another companion character, the stats for that weapon would reset to their base level and then start to raise again as you use it more. So it definitely incentivizes you using the players and the companions to commit to one weapon at a time if you want to unlock those higher tier statistics on the weapon, such as higher damage or extra elemental effects or anything like that. Modwyr, however, is not usable by other characters. It is only usable by the Watcher, and I believe this is largely due to the fact that it is interactable. You can talk to this sword. It's a talking sword, after all. All soulbound weapons are also unique weapons, which is to say that there is only one of its kind within the world, and as a result, it has a unique description found within it. All items within Pillars of Eternity in many role-playing games, if you go into your inventory screen, you can read the description of those items. From regular mundane items like, average swords or shields or what have you, it's just a description of the item itself. But with unique items, we often get a little bit more, either in terms of the history of the item, how it was created, or why it has the magical effects that it has, or even just some sort of a story or lore about the world at large. The description for Modwyr goes through different levels as you level up the weapon from using it, and it kind of follows her thought process and her feelings as she's being wielded by you, the player character, while at the same time keeping an eye out for her previous owner, Yngfrith. So we're going to read through the item description, and we'll get a little bit of flavor for who Modwyr is like. As well, we'll talk about the previous owner, Yngfrith, and maybe how Modwyr might have came about. Now, if I remember correctly, it's not on the fandom page, but if I remember correctly, you find Modwyr in the Old City, which is kind of a disgusting, horrible place to be, below the gullet in the city of Neketaka. Now, for those who haven't played Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, there is this massive city. It's essentially the capital city of an area. And inside that city is a location called the Gullet, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's where it's where everything basically drains to. All the refuse, all the trash. There's not a lot of food there. It is the slums of the area, and it is a disgusting place to be. And it is kind of this ramshackle town that is created over this giant pit that goes even further into the island where the old city used to be. So apparently this city of Neketaka is built upon an old city, and so even further below the gullet is the old city itself. And down there is where it is truly disgusting. This is where corpses and feces and other sorts of disgusting things fall down. This is where all the garbage goes. There are all sorts of horrific creatures down here as the result of, not only these bodies being tossed into the old city, but magic within this world, which has to do with essence. That's the stuff that souls are made of. The mixing of these things creates some pretty horrific and undead creatures down there to fight. So it's not a really friendly place to be. And I believe it's down here that you actually find Modwyr. I don't know why it doesn't say where you pick it up on the fandom article, but whatever, there it is. So from the very moment that you pick it up, it starts talking to you. In fact, it insults you right off the bat. You remark that this thing speaks, and it just sarcastically mocks you, which immediately lets you, the player character, know that this is gonna be a fun little toy that you have here now. Modwyr kind of continues to have this mocking attitude towards you, and in fact, they continue to have this towards everyone. Later on, as you level the sword up, you can ask them what you think about some of their companions, and it has some nice things to say and some not nice things to say. A lot of horny things to say, actually. a little bit uncouth at times, depending, I guess, on your opinion. But if you pick up the sword and you get through the first dialogue process and you accept their quest to help them find their previous owner, Yngfrith, you can read their item description. And the base level description reads, wrought of fine steel and engraved with gilded Eldadiran runes that read Modwyr, Modwyr. This blade would have been a fashionable Deerwooden noble's favored accessory 20 years ago. Time has been rather unkind to it, however. The delicate filigree relief in its pommel has been scored by accident and violence, and the tightly wound leather of its hilt is stained with patches of old blood. For all that, the blade itself is still sharp and curiously warm to the touch, and the tongue of the soul inside is sharper still. Where it's from and who might have forged it are mysteries the sword has little interest in illuminating, though it does speak with a lively Deerwooden twang, a fact that tells you more about its origins than it has any intention of doing itself. So this just talks a little bit, I think, about like the aesthetic of the sword and how it's a little bit worn down, and more importantly, that there is a soul within it, and that it seems to originate from somewhere in the Deerwood. Those details are important if you're into the overarching lore of this world, because souls don't just pop into swords willy-nilly. Like this is a mechanicalized thing. Like someone did this, right? And it's certainly possible within this world to take the essence or the soul energy out of a person, whether they're youthful and alive or dying, and then place that soul into an object. That's certainly possible. To do it in such a way that their consciousness is intact and now tied to this object is not as common. So this is some pretty high-level animancy stuff, animancy being the science of the soul itself. So somebody would have had to perform an animancy experiment to put Modwyr's soul into this sword, or at least the soul of someone that got put into the sword. Maybe the sword was named Modwyr. We don't actually know what the person's name beforehand was. And it being in the Dyrwood is, I think, makes sense within the time frame of this game when Deadfire is out, because it says here that it might have been a favorite accessory in the Dyrwood around 20 years ago, and around 20 years ago, animancy was pretty unregulated within the Dyrwood, and it still might be, depending on decisions you make in the first Pillars of Eternity game. And so animancy kind of ran wild for a little while. So experiments like these could very well have happened in the Dyrwood, and that's why you might hear a soul whose voice has a dialect that's from that area. But we don't know a lot more about who she was or how she ended up in the sword. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So as you use the sword, you eventually go from the base level to level 1, and this is where the description starts to take on more of a dialogue, or like an inner monologue, I suppose, of Modwyr herself. Level 1's item description reads, "This is incredible. I'm buzzing. Can they feel it too? Do they know? I should tell them. But what if it scares them away? Gods, I don't care. I thought I'd never have this again." I can't really talk like Modwyr. She's way more horny than I think I'm comfortable doing on the podcast, but she likes being held by a good owner. Honestly, there's a video on YouTube if you want to hear all of the dialogue. It's called Chatting with Modwyr, Deadfire Pillars of Eternity 2, on the YouTube channel for Dana Duchy, I'm not sure, or Dutchy. I'm sorry, Dana person, if you're listening to this, if I mispronounced it. But yeah, that's the name of the video, is Chatting with Modwyr, and it just goes through all of the dialogue that you have with Modwyr. Like, there's one part when you're talking to her where she says that her calluses, that is the calluses of her previous owner, felt so good on my grip. But she says it in such a way that she's like slightly moaning when she says it. So yeah, this sword derives some level of pleasure from being used by not only a competent swordsperson, but I guess a person with a strong grip. It's an entertaining dialogue, to be sure. As you continue leveling up, you hit level 2 in the description, and it reads, "This one's better than the rest. When they hold me, it almost feels real, like the way things used to be. Joy, bright and buoyant, that grows with every swing, with every slick splash of hot blood across my blade. It almost feels right. I almost feel like me. But I'm not me without her, am I? And what did she do? She left me behind, abandoned me. This one will too. But maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe we'll get to Dunnage before they realize they don't want." So we can see some inner conflict with Modwyr as you, the player character, are wielding this. They're clearly enjoying some of the usage that you are getting from them, and it's kind of reminding them of how they felt with their previous owner, which is they reference as her. But she's lamenting, obviously, about the fact that she was tossed away by her previous owner. Now, she's at this point, I'm not 100% sure. She may start to be catching on to the idea that she wasn't just left behind and that her owner's coming back. She is starting to wrestle with the idea that perhaps she might have been thrown away. And it seems like she has this abandonment issue that she's also placing upon you, the player character, because she's kind of worried that you're just going to toss her aside as well. By the time you hit level 3, you can see this inner conflict kind of coming more out. It reads, "Something's not right. We were good at first, a real team. The way we fought, it wasn't the same as it was with Yngfrith, but it wasn't bad either. There was a fire between us, and it roared when we killed. I felt alive. Like things might be okay, that this one might not leave me after all. But that fire died. What if it doesn't return? I can't go back to being alone. I can't. And so we can see here that Modwyr is wrestling even more with this idea of being abandoned, and that there was apparently like something going on between you and the player character, and as you continued using them, she's feeling like the fire is dying out a little bit, and so she's getting a little more freaked out. And before we get to the part where we wrap up her entire arc regarding finding her previous owner and what happens with you and her, I'm just going to go through some interesting tidbits about Modwyr and some things that she says about other characters and other items within the world, because I think it's very funny, to be honest. So after you've earned at least 2 levels, which we've already done the 2-level description, she'll start to open up to you a little more. She will confess to you that her owner dumped her before heading to Dunnage. which is to say she just kind of threw her away. She might look at it as an actual dumping, like in the sense of a relationship even. And this whole interaction is very clearly an allegory or a metaphor for a relationship, especially where one person was maybe a little overbearing and the other person didn't want them, and this person now has abandonment issues. Like, there's a whole kind of commentary on that, which is very interesting to get into. But her previous owner apparently just couldn't take Modwyr's talking anymore, or there's a little bit more to that story and we'll get it, but she couldn't take having Modwyr with her anymore and threw her away into the trash, and she eventually ended up in the old city beneath the gullet. As well, once you reach level 2, you can start to ask Modwyr questions. You can interact with her like you would any companion. You can even ask her what her opinions are about the companions, and so she has things to say about each companion. If you ask about Adair,
poor guy's none too bright, but those muscles.
She has 2 things to say about Jody.
The only thing Shody likes as much as her creepy god is you. I half expect Shody to crawl into your tent when you're not looking.
2 things to say about Aloth.
If Aloth wants any more scars, let him know I volunteer to help. Isilmir asked if she could buy me a drink. I told her I only thirst for blood. Almost made Aloth pee his pants.
Seraphin.
I asked him which of us he thinks is taller. Now he won't talk to me.
2 things to say about Tekehu.
Fishboy's so self-satisfied, it's a wonder he has time for anything else. He wants Rekka to touch his hair. I can tell.
For the companion Maya, she says,
She keeps asking me if I think her weapons are happy. Can you tell her to leave me alone?
Regarding Palagina, she says,
Palagina picks me up when she thinks you're not looking. For someone so severe, she's gentler than you might expect.
Constantine.
Constantine and I have an understanding. The nature of that understanding is none of your business.
For the love of God, I want to know what their understanding is. I think I have an idea based on Constantine's involvement with the Secret Slayer Survivor DLC, but I don't want to talk about it here just in case someone here hasn't played that DLC. I think perhaps maybe they know about each other's secrets. The character Reke.
Do you think Rekka got that scar doing something noble or stupid? Actually, never mind. I know the answer.
Edwin.
Edwin sings wending epics when she thinks no one's listening. It'd almost be nice if it weren't for her terrible singing voice.
And lastly, Facina.
Facina's probably the smartest person in this merry band of idiots. Other than me, obviously.
So she clearly thinks highly of herself, or she's deflecting to cope with humor because she has abandonment issues. Either way, it's definitely fun to have Modwyr in the party to see what she says about your characters and just chat about stuff. She will also comment on some items. For example, when you go to the subterranean temple north of Pococahora, a location within the Deadfire game, there is a soulbound mason there called the Magistrate's Cudgel, which she refers to as really, really stupid. And I love the item description for Magistrate's Cudgel, but it doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about today, so I will put that item description at the end of today's episode for you to hear in its just unabashed and unabridged form. So eventually you learn that their previous owner is in a place called Dunwich, and so their previous owner is Yngfrith, and Modwyr wants to go confront her, but also at the same time kind of doesn't want to confront her, so it's obviously an emotional journey for her. So you can actually go find Yngfrith at Dunwich and confront them about this. Yngfrith is the original owner of Modwyr, the soulbound blade found beneath Nekataka, which I've already mentioned. I'm reading this off of the fandom website for Pillars of Eternity. Yngfrith is born a cipher and was sold by her parents to a master animancer who is working to refine the art of housing souls, and thought that she, that is, Yngfrith, would be an asset. So it sounds like Yngfrith was sold basically into slavery of a sort to a master animancer who I'm almost certain we're going to read right away is the person who helped create Modwyr. She helped create Modwyr. There you go. She, referring to Yngfrith, obviously helped her master animancer create Modwyr. This act horrified her so much she fled into the night with the blade in hand, vowing to fight abuses of animancy. So obviously what she did to the person that Modwyr used to be, that led them to put the soul inside of the sword horrified her, and she is kind of vowing retribution. And so she's going out as a vigilante to use this very thing that she helped create to destroy those that would abuse animancy. She joined the faction Dunreed Row for a time, which is a kind of an intelligence agency, if you will, within the first Pillars game, and she was using her abilities to fight animancers. Especially as a cipher, she would definitely belong in Dunreed Row, because ciphers have kind of like, I call them mental powers. They're like a psionics class, but that's not exactly fair given the lore of how this all works. But she didn't like who is she becoming, because she started to end up becoming the very people that she hunted. So she fled to the Deadfire, which is where the second game is set. And she's trying to put her past and her guilt behind her, but it didn't really matter. No matter what she did, the shame was with her, and it kept eating away at her. And eventually she threw Modwyr away, hoping that the shame would go with her, which it didn't, apparently. When you talk to Yngfrith, she laments upon that. And I can understand that, right? Like, if you are starting to, if you feel really guilty for something you did, and you take this sword that can talk, it would literally be a talking reminder of this thing that you did in your past that is so shameful to you, and that would just eat away at you. And even though you're trying to do this thing that is, going to redeem what you have done, when you start to realize that what you're turning into is just like the people that you're hunting, that's just going to add to the shame. And so now you don't have a way to cope with this guilt that you have, and you have this talking reminder of all this guilt you have. It's not necessarily surprising to find out that Yngfrith just threw Modwyr away, which is still pretty awful, considering the fact that you made Modwyr, and now they're just alone in the dark somewhere. After confronting Yngfrith, and it's still not getting any resolution as to how they were created, you can level up Modwyr to the final level, which is level 4. Or, alternatively, you can choose to release the soul from the object, at which point the weapon no longer is a soul-bound weapon, it just turns into a unique weapon. And it has the same item description as the one I originally read at the base level, except it doesn't talk about there being a soul within inside of it. But if you do choose to keep the soul within Modwyr, the item description at level 4 reads, "We found Yngfrith. I still can't quite believe it. She was there in Dunwich, just like she said she'd be. She apologized. I never thought she'd do that. But when she held me again, it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel like it used to. Was I a fool to think I'd just be like it was between us? I wanted her to take me back, even if things weren't like they were, even if they had to be different. But then I remembered the Watcher's warm hands and the feeling of splitting a beast from neck to navel. I remember how they never left me, and then I wanted to stay with them too. So I let the Watcher decide. Let me go with Yngfrith or keep me for themselves. And they chose me. They chose me. And I'm happy? But no, that's not it. I'm not scared anymore. I'm free." And so there you have a conclusion to her inner conflict, if you will. Now, obviously, this item description alludes to the fact that you, the Watcher character, get to decide what happens to her, both whether the soul stays in the sword or not, or whether or not you keep the sword or give them back to Yngfrith. Obviously, it makes sense that if you kept the sword, you'd be able to read the item description. If you gave the sword away, you wouldn't be able to read the item description. So there's no description, there's no lore for what happens when you give it to Yngfrith. Presumably, they go about their merry way, and they rebuild their relationship. Or, who knows, maybe Yngfrith throws her back into another pit. I don't know. But regardless, that's kind of the overarching story between Modwyr and Yngfrith. That's their story of how they got together and how they were separated, and their little short interaction they had with you, the player character, when ultimately they might stay with you or they might stay with this other person. And like I said, it all seems to be a pretty decent allegory for real life relationships of lost love, of pining for people back, finding someone new, and growing as a person, right? From being scared to being abandoned to just realizing that you're not scared anymore. You're okay with what happened. And it's an interesting story, and it's a really interesting character. One that I felt was worth actually, doing an episode about and featuring on. And so hopefully there's some audio in here that has been pretty good to listen to from the actual game of Modwyr talking. And hopefully it's piqued your interest. If you've been playing Pillars of Eternity 2 or you've been looking forward to it, then, try to go find Modwyr down in the old city. If you're watching the Obsidian live stream of Deadfire, or the Road to Avowed as they're calling it, make sure to try to put some pressure on them to pick up Modwyr, because Modwyr is the best. No, I'm just kidding. Don't pressure them. Let them play the game the way they want. I do hope that they pick up the sword in the Deadfire live stream that they're doing on Road to Avowed with Obsidian, because like the sword is great and it's a hilarious character, and I also love the story that goes on there. It's also a half decent sword. You do have to kill a lot of people in order to actually unlock some of these levels. I guess it depends what you mean by a lot of people. And from a role playing perspective, maybe a lot. You have to kill like actual Kith people, which is not like creatures or beasts. That's like the sentient races of this world. So you have to, I don't know, board pirate ships and kill people that attack you, kind of a thing, rather than just go killing beasts. But yeah, that's the story of Modwyr and Yngfrith. I hope everyone liked that episode today, and I guess now we ask the regular question of what might this have to do with Avowed?
You know what? I'm impressed. That was, whew, wow! I've never experienced anything like that before.
Oh, sounds like you two got something real special there. Almost makes a man wish for a sword of his own.
Adair, you have a sword already. Several, in fact.
Yeah, but I've never had one that purrs when you stroke it.
You saying you ain't got the equipment, farmer? Or that you don't be knowing how to use it?
Nah, I treat my swords real good. Got this whetstone move that I do. Keeps him pacified.
So there's not a lot that I think Modwyr will really have to do with the game of Avowed. The only thing I can think of, and this is a possibility, is that we will see Yngfrith and Modwyr in the Living Lands, because Carrie Patel, lead game designer for Avowed, has said that there are going to be returning characters from Pillars of Eternity to Deadfire. She specifically mentions Deadfire. Now, we already know that one of those characters is Inquisitor Lodwyn, who is the leader of a Steel Garrote chapter, which is an order of paladins called the Steel Garrote. They follow the goddess Woodica. They're all about hunting people down who violate contracts between people. But regardless of them, there are supposed to be at least one other character from Deadfire that is going to appear in Avowed. And when I try to think of potential characters for who might pop into Avowed that are from the Deadfire, there's a few that pop into my mind. One is Be'ern, which is kind of like Adair's adopted son, Adair being the companion, one of the companions from the Pillars of Eternity series. But Modwyr and Yngfrith are definitely a couple of other individuals that I think would make excellent characters to return in Avowed. Not just because of their story, but also because, well, Modwyr is a talking sword, right? So it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting stuff to have. So I think that there is a decent level of chance that Obsidian might have selected those characters to bring into the Living Lands, even just for a cameo or for, comedic purposes or something like that, or to show players kind of like what happened to them, right? Because like players might have gotten invested when playing Deadfire into their story and wanted to know, I wonder what happened to them after the credits rolled on Deadfire, and maybe they'll show us. I don't know. Obviously, there's a plethora of characters that they could choose from the Deadfire game to bring as a cameo, so the actual chance of this is probably very small, but I don't know. In my mind, they're one of the contenders that I would pick from, so that's the only thing I can think of, is finally getting a resolution to what happens with them. Obviously, it would canonize that your player character in Deadfire didn't keep Modwyr, but I think that that's a pretty fine canon thing to have, especially for something that small within the world. But yeah, otherwise, nothing else in Avowed that I can think of. So we'll just jump out into closing today's episode. What have I been playing lately? I've been playing Dragon Age the Veilguard, which you know I had to do because I've been talking about it for weeks, or at least the lead up to it. And my goodness, what a divisive game this is. There's a lot of chatter online about it, and I can understand the division with Dragon Age. I can't think of a lot of video game series that have undergone such drastic changes in its lifespan as Dragon Age. Like, between the first, second, third, and this fourth installment, there has been changes made to each game, not just in terms of like the aesthetics, but also the way the narrative presented and the way the gameplay and the mechanics work, right? And so I kind of understand where some fans are coming from. When you play Dragon Age 1 or 2 and you really love those games, you start to associate like that game to the name Dragon Age because it's the same IP, right? But then as the game undergoes gameplay and mechanical changes, it becomes a different game, even though it's got the same name attached to it. And so there's this excitement when like, oh, a new Dragon Age is coming out. And there's this like hope that it's going to live up to like the expectations it had before, or that it's going to, fulfill that Dragon Age itch. And when the game releases and it's functionally different than previous games, essentially therefore making it really a different game, it's understandable that some fans would be disappointed. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that the developers did a bad job with Veilguard in that regard. Like, it's their game, right? Like, they're allowed to develop it the way they want. They want to do more of an action RPG. That's totally within their purview, and I stand behind them on that. And this is the game that they wanted to make. And also, I imagine that the personnel that were on the first and second Dragon Age games are not the same team that made the Veilguard, right? So you can't really expect the same game to be made. So even though I understand some of the, I guess, the upset feelings that some of the fans have who have been in the series for a long time, at the same time, I also understand like where the developers are coming from. And this is just kind of how it's got to be. I feel like at this point, maybe the name Dragon Age kind of misleads some fans. I don't know if there can be like other names used within this world, but regardless, if you take Dragon Age for what it is, it's like, for me anyways, I'm enjoying myself. I recognize that some people have issues with the writing, which I don't know if that's just a rationalization to get angry at a game that you're mad at for other reasons, and you know that those reasons aren't necessarily the most valid ones. But regardless, I have recognized a couple issues with the writing. There's just been a couple like cringe moments with like characters adding a line here or there that was like, I mean, you didn't need to say that. But like, all things aside, like, this isn't a podcast where we do tons and tons of game review stuff. All I know is I play Dragon Age the Veilguard, and after an hour, I turn the game off, and I walk away from the experience happy that I spent my hour the way I did, right? So at the end of the day, I feel like that's what game developers are trying to do, whether it's you're trying to make your players have fun, or you're trying to make them think or be challenged or feel certain emotions. You're trying to make it so that the time that they invest into the game, into that experience, that they're walking away from that experience going, that was a good use of that time. And that's happening for me with Dragon Age, right? Like, I recognize it's a huge change. I haven't been a long-running fan of the series. I never got into it back in the first two games. I only really got into it with Inquisition, and I really didn't like Inquisition that much. Not because it was a bad game, it just wasn't my style. I was playing it because I agreed to play it for a friend, and I only had so much money. I bought the game, and that was the only game I could really play at the time. So again, Inquisition wasn't really a bad game. I did kind of learn to enjoy it, but it wasn't really my thing. So I don't have any of these long-standing feelings with Dragon Age, so I'm kind of walking into Veilguard just as its own. I don't know a lot about the world. I don't have any baggage of expectations from what the game should be like compared to other titles. I'm just walking in, experiencing it the way it is. And I'm enjoying it, you know? Like, I think the combat is very fun. There's definitely some stuff that needs to be tweaked, I think, in the combat. The enemies seem to completely disregard my companions, which is incredibly annoying, especially when you're playing a mage character who's very, like, slow going with some of their spells. But otherwise, like, I'm enjoying the combat. I'm not skipping any dialogue, which is very rare for me. I usually just turn subtitles on, read the subtitles, and hit skip when I'm done reading them. But I find myself actually engrossed within the cinematics and the cutscenes that they have, and I'm excited to see where the story goes. I'm a little disappointed in the first twist that the story takes when you first confront Solus and you learn about the big bad guys kind of thing. I had an expectation, I think, on what the story was going to be, which was really interesting. This previous companion being the main antagonist, and like some of us, romanced Solus in the previous game. So there was a little bit of a twist there I wasn't necessarily a big fan of. But, as far as I go, like, I'm walking away from this game thinking, hey, this is fun. I'm enjoying myself. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't really like rating systems, but 8 out of 10 would be probably what I would pick for it. Or 7 out of 10, but I guess 7 out of 10 is just as good as 0 for some reason. I don't really understand the logic there, but there you have it. So I'm enjoying it. What about you? Is anyone else out there playing Dragon Age of Veilguard? I'll admit I haven't got very far, so maybe I'll update you as I keep going. I don't get a lot of gaming time, so it's going to take me quite a while. But I paid full price, damn it, so I'm going to play it until Stalker 2 comes out, and then I'll jump to that, or I'll stick through Veilguard. We'll see. But yeah, if anyone else has out there been playing Veilguard and you've got some strong opinions and you'd like to change my mind, or you'd just like to chat about the game, you can do so. worldofeora@gmail.com. You can also reach me on there to ask me questions about the show, about myself, about Pillars of Eternity, about Avowed, offer speculations. If you have something you want to say, you can put it on the show. You can record yourself, send me it through the email, and I can put it on the show as well. If you'd like to reach out to me on Twitter, you can do so at World of Eora. And then lastly, if you would like to support the show directly, then you can do so at ko-fi.com/worldofeora. But again, as I say on every episode, I'm not expecting anything there. That is just there for those who value doing something like that. Thanks everybody for joining me on today's, what I would call a fun episode of learning about a talking sword from Pillars of Eternity. And will we see that same talking sword in Avowed? Potentially speaking, there's very much a chance that it could happen, and I think it would be a pretty good option in terms of cameos or returning characters for sure. But who knows? Anyways, that's been everything. Thanks everyone. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time. Excerpt from Charter regarding the establishment of municipal domains and the appointment of their registered magisters, under the right and natural guidance of the Fyrkoning, divinely appointed ruler of the Empire of Aedir and beloved of Vodica. Long may he reign, penned by Quinwitha Kinmardu, agent of the court. Let it be known that enclosed with this document, bearing the seal of the beloved Fyrkoning, long may he reign, is the instrument of which the document speaks. In light of the recent misguided rebellion of the Deerwooden colony, the Imperial Ministry sees fit to coalesce the functions of the Colonial Court of Judges into a single office. Hereto the officer of the court shall, with the full authority of the Imperial Ministry, assume the rank and privileges of magistrate of the court for a term of office to be determined by said ministry. And let it be known that all who assume the position of magistrate of the court of the Empire of Aedir shall be given at their start of term the enclosed cudgel bearing the grave visage of our most beloved Fyrkoning, long may he reign, and all that in possession of the aforementioned cudgel shall have, by divine authority, leave to enact justice upon the face of the petitioners in their court. And let it be known that execution by cudgel, well permitted at the magistrate's preference, is not endorsed per se by the court, unless the petitioner in question has been found guilty of crimes most heinous, such as those involving the misapplication of animancy or rebellion against the imperial throne. And let it be known, finally, that the magistrate and their staff are strictly forbidden the use of the cudgel for unsanctioned acts, and that no exceptions shall be made except for the sole discretion of our most beloved Fyrkoning, long may he reign.